Welcome to the London Horror Movie Club. I'm horror writer Lauren Jane Barnett.
And I'm Chris Sapikowski, Lauren's older brother, and I've been watching horror movies since I was 8.
Join us as we talk about the wild, weird, and wonderful horror films set in England's eerie capital. Welcome back, everyone. This month on the London Horror Movie Club, as promised, we have another great interview. Chris and I are very excited to introduce Alex Churchyard. He's in Britain already something of a superstar in the indie horror film. You've probably seen him on the BBC. He's been on the radio on Radio Essex, and he was just a couple days ago on BBC here on the radio again. So he's been all over the place, but hopefully somebody a bit new for our American audiences. He's a great indie filmmaker. He's done shorts as well as feature films and is best known for I Scream on the Beach, which was up for 9 awards, or actually 13, and won 9, including a Best Kill, which we're going to be very excited to talk about. Welcome, Alex.
Hey, that was a lovely introduction. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. I'd say I loved I Scream on the Beach. I hope you don't mind. I'm probably going to ask you the question you get asked all the time. Best Kill, you won that award. Did you love winning it? And did you think that that was your best kill in the film?
Yeah, so I think the best kill, I think what we won was for the big brick that landed on the guy's head, I think.
I thought I was wondering if it was that or Danny, because there's
it was one of the two, and I actually can't remember which one it was. But yeah, that brick death that we did, that was like one of those things where kind of figured out how to do it, and then we kind of reverse engineered it into the film. So there's footage from like 3 years before we shot that where we just did it with one of our friends. So we pre-shot it to sort of see if it worked, and it did. So that kind of death was going to be so many different characters in the film, and we just kept rewriting and always working that one in. And Danny's death as well. That was, it was meant to be different. It was meant to be originally quite brutal, that she got picked up and actually got placed on top of. We couldn't figure out how to do it, so we did that instead. But yeah, both those two deaths, I guess, are probably the best deaths. So whichever one won, yeah, I think it was the brick one, but I'm not sure.
Both good deaths, though, and good deaths are one of the things that make horror movies so great, is just to find something new and unique, right?
Yeah, I think you have to have, like, as well, like, you want some that are quite memorable, and maybe, I suppose you've probably seen a version of most deaths now in films, but you kind of want something that's a little bit unique, or a slightly different spin on it. And obviously, Danny, the kind of like end shot of Danny's death is meant to be a bit sort of Cannibal Holocaust in a way, a bit tamer than that, but it's kind of meant to be that type of thing. But yeah, big rusty metal pole instead.
It reminded me as well of The Omen. I don't know if you were going for that.
Yeah, and that as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You have quite a lot of like nostalgia in there, and Chris mentioned the 80s when we were talking about it. Was the 80s for a particular reason? Is it just love from your own past?
Yeah, I think so, because like I think like a lot of the films I discovered when I was younger were things that like my stepmom had on VHS, and a lot of that was sort of 80s horror. So that was probably my sort of main exposure. And I kind of, around the time I kind of got into horror, Scream, which is a 90s film, had been out like a few years, but obviously that's a really great entry point if you kind of want to get into like 80s horror, because it's basically like referencing every single like slasher film from the 80s kind of thing. So that's like a film that was quite like a sort of entry point for me. And so I guess like growing up, I discovered the films that film sort of mentions, and got into 80s horror. So I think like it's quite influential, and I think generally you're finding like a lot of directors, and there's a lot of like nostalgic stuff at the moment that's like things like Stranger Things, which is obviously really nostalgic for the 80s. And I think you're getting that because quite a lot of filmmakers that are kind of emerging have kind of either grown up with that, or that's what they discovered, and that's kind of what influenced them. So yeah, 80s was hugely influential. And I Scream on the Beach wasn't always going to be set in the 80s, but at a certain point, like me and the co-director Mike decided to kind of sort of change course and try and with absolutely no money kind of make a period film, which is a really stupid thing to do, but it kind of works. You know, if you have quite a keen eye, you will notice things that shouldn't be there. But you know, we
I
did.
liked it though. I mean, I liked the throwback to the 80s. I mentioned it to Lauren. It was just the way it was shot and having the 80s. I mean, just everything about it. And basically because I was a kid in the 80s, right? So I mean, it was like, this is great. Love it. What movies? I mean, you said Scream was one of the ones that you know kind of get you into that. It's slasher movies. Was there a specific movie that you saw as a kid that it kind of triggered your love for horror movies?
It probably was Scream, because you know, and I think the reason that like Scream was an entry point for me is because I was probably the sort of right age for that to kind of be in Blockbuster and seeing that case and thinking, oh, like what's that, and asking lots of questions, and then sort of eventually led me to see it, and that kind of was a gateway. And I guess as well, I liked, you know, the fact that it was sort of quite postmodern, and it was, you know, like what they say, like called meta now, kind of it was self-aware, it knew that it was a horror film. And I think most of the stuff I make, you know, it's pretty self-aware, and it's, you know, Scream is kind of a parody, and my stuff tends to be comedy horror. So you know, I think that film really, I mean, I was also like, I don't know if this is a good art, like a good frame of reference, but I was like massively into Buffy the Vampire Slayer when I was growing up. And that's, again, I mean, it's of that ilk because it's something that is really sort of self-aware of the tropes, kind of tries to go against the tropes. I mean, the whole concept of that character is that, because she looks like who would normally be the victim in these things, and the whole thing is
Right.
so I guess, though, you know, it's a TV show, not a film, but you know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I think Scream as well, like a huge influence on me and a huge part of like what made me want to try and make films. I suppose the other, I mean, my favorite horror film is Evil Dead 2, but I did discover that a bit later. But just the like sort of crazy zaniness, and I think what I love about Evil Dead 2 as well is that you kind of have the Evil Dead, which is like Sam Raimi making something on a low budget, and then you know, he got discovered and he got to essentially like remake his film the way he wanted to, but just put a number at the end of it. And I think that's like an amazing story. And it made, you know, he bettered it as well. It made it so much better. And yeah, so I love that as well.
Gosh, yeah. That's nice. Actually, you're doing I to not to forecast too much stuff, but you're doing a documentary on how difficult it is doing indie films in horror at the moment, aren't you? You just launched it. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like we literally just like announced it yesterday, but yeah, it's called Shoestring, and it's like predominantly going to be focused on like UK indie horror, but we will kind of go out a bit further as well to kind of get like a perspective on this country's scene. But yeah, I think like with sort of some of the interest we've had from the BBC over the last few months, and also just because like I've always been interested in documentary, and obviously we met a lot of people along the way, and we're obviously versed in it as well. I thought, well, why not make a documentary? And it sort of came about because we were starting to figure out special features for Videoshop Tales of Terror and make a sort of making of documentary about that. And then I just sort of thought, well, you know, and I was sort of talking to a lot of the directors from that, saying, you know, let's do some interviews. And then I just sort of thought, well, it would actually be really interesting to talk to them like more widely about their careers. And then I started thinking, but probably not just directors, like actors, you know, makeup artists, anyone who's ever worked on one, and then also the people that watch them, because that's really interesting, and the people that put on festivals that show them. And I think you know, I think it's really interesting, and I think there'll be like a lot of personal stories in it. And I know like a lot of actors and things that have met on the sets of films, and then they got together. And you know, so I think there's like a lot. You know, I think there'd be quite a broad interest as well as. Sorry, my dog is making loads of noise, but I'll show you that.
As okay, it's usually Chris's dog that's making the noise.
It usually is. I'm surprised they're not up here right now.
But yeah, so that's Shoestring, and you know, because basically films that are made on like a shoestring budget. And yeah, we're literally starting that tomorrow, like filming with Danni Thompson, So and we'll be working on it, through next year. But we've had like an amazing amount of people contact us since yesterday, and we'd obviously sort of pre-signed a few people up as well. But yeah, I'm like, really excited about that. And my sort of film directing partner, Mike Holiday, he's sort of he made Ice Cream on the Beach with me, and then he sort of shot the majority of our second film, Mosaic, with me as well. But then he sort of took a sabbatical really from filmmaking, and I kind of went and worked on Videoshop and did like a segment for the Horoscope films. But he's coming back for that as well, which is really exciting.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What do you prefer? You're doing documentary now. You've done feature length films. You're doing, you've done shorts. You've written, directed, produced. What do you get the most interest in? What excites you the most when you're looking at a project in the beginning?
I think in terms of role, I think like directing is the thing I like doing the most. But obviously, I think at our level, sometimes you end up wearing a lot of hats, kind of thing. So you do end up like producing, which I enjoy, but I think like in an ideal world, probably solely direct but be there from the conception of the project to the end. I've edited a lot for like a living, so I'm kind of used to editing, but that's something that like it gets harder and harder the more you do, because you just have all these things piling up. So it's one of those things where I wish I could kind of like sort of get someone else to do that occasionally. But yeah, I think directing, because it kind of encompasses everything really, because if you're there from the conception of the project, whether you're writing it or not, you're going to be steering it in some direction. And then of course when it comes to the post-production, as a director, you have a big hand in how that's put together and how it's completed. So that's my sort of favorite role. We end up, you have to sort of at this level like diversify quite a lot. And I've done a lot of, with Ice Cream on the Beach, like we did a lot of the effects rigging there, because we didn't really have any effects artists. We had like a makeup artist on that one, but no real effects artist. So, and I used to love like going in my garden and trying to figure out how you would like decapitate somebody and things like that. I always thought like we live like where we live, we're kind of like up and down flats, so that means that most of the backs of the properties have like balconies and stairs, so you can see into everyone's garden. So I wondered sometimes what our neighbours thought when I've got like Hannah, like my wife, with a shovel like hitting this head off of a mannequin, and I mean, it's happened. Like when on Mosaic, we sort of started working with a guy called Alex Churchyard, who's an effects artist, makeup artist, and like I went and would go to his house and we'd sit in his garden, we'd talk about effects, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, we can fill a condom up with blood and then whack that," and you could hear like the neighbours in the garden next door, and I'm just like, "Oh no, this really sounds terrible."
Something bad happens, the neighbors aren't going to say they were super quiet. It seemed very, very nice.
Well, dude, is doing the special effects. I think I remember talking to your brother that he did some of that as well. Is doing special effects something that you then like got a hand in as well? Or was it a family thing?
Yeah, I mean, my brother Max, he's very annoying in that like whatever he puts his hand to, he's like really good at it, like much better than I am. And so like, I mean, he's like directed with me and things as well, and he's I for Videoshop Tales of Terror, we wanted like a Videoshop model, and we wanted it on top of like a mountain, and he like does a lot of like Warhammer stuff, which is like painting miniature models and things. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll make that," and then he made this thing, and it was stunning. And so yeah, he's actually really good at makeup and effects, and I don't really know why. It's just like he put his sort of mind to it, and he's good at it. But I guess we're both, I'm not, I wouldn't be able to like do makeup on anybody, but I can, I guess like I'm quite practical in that I could sort of figure out how to rig something, like if I wanted a decapitation and blood squirting, I guess for whatever reason it's in my brain. And I guess it's just because we've been doing it since we were kids, and when you had to, you'd have someone just putting blood in their mouth and like spitting it through a hose kind of thing. And yeah, so that's the. But
Do
yeah.
you like work? Do you like working with your brother?
Yeah, I do. To be fair, it's yeah. So I mean, he's sort of particularly. I mean, he worked on Ice Cream on the Beach a bit. He particularly came on like when we did Mosaic, did like bits of makeup and effects. He's sort of been like an AD on the Videoshop films, so like an assistant director. And then we co-directed our segment, the Mary Whitehouse segment for Videoshop. And that was because, you know, we sort of grew up together and watched a lot of the same films, both really like The Evil Dead, and that's like a homage to The Evil Dead. But yeah, you know, he's someone like who I think, and it's the same with Mike as well, who's, you know, not my brother, but we've known each other a long time and probably have a similar relationship. I think we sort of have like similar vision, and you just know, you know, with Max, my brother, I don't really like doing like cinematography. It's not my strongest suit. I prefer to work with a DOP or at least have, you know, someone else there who's better at lighting. But with that film, I decided it would be easiest if I did do it. So I really wanted someone behind the monitor, like making sure everything was right, kind of thing, in terms of sort of. So that's why he sort of co-directed with me on that. And yeah, I mean, it was the right decision. And yeah, I always try and get Max there if I can, because he can just sort of, you know, if you need someone made up, he can just do it. And it's a bit annoying that he's good at it. But
No, that's great. I'm curious then, you've done a lot of different kinds of directing and mixed with other directors and on your own. What was the most challenging experience for you?
There's been a few. I think like when we did Ice Cream on the Beach, the first like we with that film we kind of shot it over weekends, which is what a lot of us do really, because you have to earn some money in the week and then, you know, spend it at the weekend. But we sort of started quite small and we just did you know, there's the scenes with like the girl and the mum kind of thing where she's being horrible to her. So we did that first, and then the second weekend was all the stuff in the pub, and it was like we suddenly had, and we got a lot of people to help out, and we had a lot of extras, and we'd never really had extras in our lives. Didn't know what to do with anybody, and we had this pub, and although it doesn't seem complicated, it was just like, because you had to like block everyone and have everyone going and that, and I was just like, oh, what have we done? And I was like, so that one was really difficult. We had, when we did Mosaic, the second film, Mike was sort of co-directing with that with me, but when we came to do the wraparound, which is the big bit, and it's got Simon Bamford in it and Tony Marden's in that as well, and it's the sort of thing that connects it all together. It was during COVID, but like the restrictions were gone, but it was when you could get tracked and traced, even if it was just that you know, pass someone on the bus and your phone and that happened to Mike just as we were about to do it. So I had to do it on my own, and it was just like I was just not mentally prepared, and that was probably like it was just so, we had so much to do. I mean, I luckily did have Max on that, and I had a second cameraman, but I was just so stressed, and like I'd sort of be texting Mike, but you know, it was sort of like I guess it was like a good test for me, because I've sort of gone on to do things on my own, and it was really the first time I had sort of done anything like that on my own, and it was like there wasn't really time to think about it too much, because we just had constant people in and out. A lot of, you know, the ending of Mosaic involves a hell of a lot of extras, and yeah, it just kept moving. We did I mean, we basically got into the location on the Friday to set up, and I think we left like 4 a.m. We were back there at about 6:30, and I think we were leaving at about 3 a.m, and then the same the next day. It was a crazy shoot. And I'm sort of surprised that Simon Bamford still talks to me, because it was just like, it was really nice. But it was, yeah, so that was probably the most challenging. I think when we came to do like the Videoshop wraparound, the first one, that was like a big difference, because that was when Mike had sort of officially stepped away, So I was coming into that on my own. We had Andy Boothby, who is the cinematographer on that, who I'd met on Witches of the Sands, but I didn't know him that well at that point, and had never worked with, I hadn't worked with him in that capacity as like a director, and a lot of new people as well as like some old people. So I was quite nervous about that, but I sort of like fell into that quite easily in the end, and I felt like we were sort of successful with that. So yeah, I don't know
Have
if
you?
that's what you said last at all, but it's like a load of waffle there. Sorry.
No. I'm curious, when you're saying you get all these people and stuff, where are you finding? I know Lauren has now been killed in multiple ways in different movies and scenes, but where are you finding your actors and actresses? Are these just people that you've met, or is the indie horror scene getting big enough where like you're getting 4 people come out to be like, I can be the girl who gets a brick thrown on her head, or how does it work for you? Like, what are you looking for when you, or how are you finding the people that you're putting in your films?
Yeah, so when we did like Ice Cream on the Beach, it was kind of tough because though we'd made like shorts and things, we'd been working like professionally for a few years, and we hadn't really made anything creative. And we knew a few people, but we didn't know the amount of people we know now. So in terms of like the behind the scenes, there were times when Mike and I were kind of doing all the roles. So like Mike was like filming, and I'd have like the boom pole, and it was really tiny, some of it. As I say, the pub thing was a bit bigger, but like I know like when we shot the ending of that film, it was literally just me and Mike and the actors kind of thing. In terms of like people, yeah, I mean, when we did that film, I guess we more like we did the sort of traditional like putting things on casting websites. There was a few like exceptions where we kind of met Danni a few years previously, and she actually originally, because in the film she plays an actress, in Ice Cream on the Beach she plays an actress, and that was actually like all retrofitted, because what had happened is we'd filmed the sort of decorator, the fake film that she's in. We'd filmed that years before, because we tried to get Ice Cream on the Beach going 3 years before we actually ended up shooting the main bulk of it. And we'd already filmed that with her, but then we were like, oh, it kind of sucks that she's only going to be in it for like 10 seconds. So I contacted her and said, would you be interested in a bigger role? And we kind of had this character in it that was just like awful to everybody, basically. And we were like, oh, what if like the reason she's kind of awful is that she's, like an aspiring actress who is kind of like maybe slightly lied about how big her film roles have been, and she's just annoyed that she's stuck in this little pub. So we kind of retrofitted that. So like Danni was someone where we were like kind of pulled her from that bit of casting that we'd done before. And yeah, I think we were just, with Ice Cream on the Beach, we really just lucked out because one of the guys, Jamie Evans, who is also a director, he plays Jeremy. He plays like the guy that's like a film geek, dies quite late on. We were shooting on South End Seafront on the beach. We were filming like this promo thing that we never really used. What we were doing, we had a guy holding an ice cream, and it was meant to be like strawberry sauce was going on it, but it was fake blood. And he saw us and he came up. So Jamie Evans was walking past, and he was like, oh, what are you making? I was like, oh, we're just doing a promo for a film. And he was like, oh, I'm an actor. So we met him when we were doing that, and then I think we met up with him in a pub, and we always kind of said, oh, well, we'll put you in this. There's a guy called Chris in it who plays the guy that kind of lives on an allotment plot, the sort of dirty guy that gets gutted. He's an actor that does a lot of theatre in Southend, but he is the dad of one of our really good friends. So he was like someone again where it wasn't always. I think at one point he might have been the police chief that Martin plays, but like he was always involved. And Hannah is my wife, who played the main character, and that was real. Obviously we wanted to have her in it, but it was one of those things where we were so scared that actors would just drop out midway through, because we were shooting over weekends for months. We were like, well, if it happens to one of the smaller characters, it could be funny if they suddenly disappear or we have to recast them, but probably not the main character. So let's make sure we have someone we really trust for that role. And we were lucky that no one actually did end up dropping out. But yeah, so Ice Cream on the Beach was like sort of traditional sort of posting things out on casting websites, and we just really lucked out with a lot of those guys. I think like as you progress, you do like a film. Like when we had Ice Cream on the Beach, I remember that sort of premiered at Horror on Sea, and it was the same year that Micah had a film called Pandemonium, and it had a lot of the same people in it, but it also had James Hayman Morton and Charlie Bond in it, and those guys have done quite a lot of indie film. They did that film recently, Pals with Cheerleaders. But I met them and I started talking to them, and then we cast them in Mosaic. They were the first people. Tony Marden I met at Horror on Sea. I bought some artwork from him. I think some of those little things there were his. The little guys from Halloween 3. And it sort of like snowballs, I guess, because you meet all these people at festivals, at premieres, and on other people's films, and just as time goes on, it snowballs, and that ball just gets bigger, and more people, and you're more connected. And we're sort of in a place now where we'll put like casting things up online if we need something, but generally there's like a big enough pool of people where it can just go back to people we've worked with before, or people I know others have worked with as well. And I generally prefer that, because you want to work with people who are A, good, but also B, really nice, and aren't going to give you any trouble on set, really. And especially and people who have worked on this kind of, you want people who have worked on low budget stuff so that their expectations aren't like ridiculous. They're not going to be like, no one's going to be like following them around looking after them on set. They're just sort of fend for yourself a little bit kind of thing. And yeah, so it's a lot easier now, and as well, like we have like more of a dedicated crew. So we have like Ian, our sound guy, who's fantastic, and as I say, working with I work with a few DPs now. I mean, I really like working with Andy, but I'm working with another DOP on another project, Python, soon, Kamal. And I've worked with a guy called Duncan as well. And so you just find, I think you find that more people kind of want to work with you as well when you've got, I don't know, I don't want to sound egotistical and say like a proven track record, but we have some sort of track record, I guess. We've made something and people can watch it. So that process is a lot easier now.
I can imagine. And is it, so you talked a little bit about the fact that you're doing Videoshop Tales 2 you've been filming now, and Videoshop 1 is coming out. Have you found that with sequels and things like that, there's also, you can bring back a lot of the same people, or do you try and go for a totally different vibe with a sequel?
Yeah, so like with this second one, it's like because in terms of what I do for Videoshop, or what I've done is I've done the wraparound story, and then I've done the sequel to the wraparound story, and it is like this second one is like a true sequel in that it kind of continues on basically like the same story, the story from the last one. It continues that story on. So it really was about bringing back most of the cast again, and there's a few new people in there. I think there's at least a couple of people playing different characters for whatever reason. I'm not really I don't know, I'm not like super bothered about continuity. I mean, obviously with the Videoshop films, they're meant to connect, but all of our films do connect, and it's sort of on accident. Like, so Danny's character, Paula, who's in Ice Cream on the Beach, who dies, we decided, like when we did Mosaic, that one of the parts of that would be involving that character, and it's modern day, and she's alive, but we don't explain it. And then when we did Videoshop, there was like a lot of I think Lau really liked the idea that Danny would kind of be in all the different segments and the wraparound. And I thought, well, if she played that actor character again, then you've actually got a logical explanation for that, because she's Paula, the actress in the Videoshop, and then she's in the segments as characters she's played, kind of thing. But again, she dies in Videoshop, and then she's back in Videoshop 2. So don't care about continuity.
I love that.
How many movies do you have, or how many stories, whether they're shorts or whatever, going on in your head at one time? I mean, it's you've touched on a lot of different, stories that you're working on. Are you working on multiple at once, or are you very siloed and just thinking like one until that's done and then you start over again?
A bit of both, in that I think there's like a lot of ideas, and then I think I tend to I guess like it because I've never like sat down and had writer's block. It like I've never sat down like at the computer and tried to write something that's not already in my head. But I think like I come up with an idea and it can't fully form, and then sort of move on, and then I'll just kind of progress that the dominant idea, I guess, in my head. But I think there's, in terms of what like film, the next feature would be, I think that we've had like 4 or 5 that it could have been, kind of thing, and we've decided to go with this documentary. But there are like a few other features that are sort of bubbling away. But I know like we had like a project that we were going to do called The Wolf Will Hunt. That's kind of been put on hold. We were going to do a decorator movie. That's kind of on hold. The next thing that we will do, aside from the documentary, is it's the Christmas film. It's called Fuck It, Let's Kill Santa, which is like, and
Yes.
that's something like that I mean, Hannah's kind of helping with it, but that's something I've been kind of developing as like the first sort of feature that I'll direct solely. Because obviously I've done like the wraparound for Videoshop, but then there's this segments that are done by other directors, and I've done bits and pieces, but never actually a full 90-minute film completely directed by me. And I think Andy's interested in being a DOP on that, so that's kind of the film that's kind of sort of bubbling away at the moment, which I'm really excited about. It's very stupid, but essentially it's about this group of people that it opens with them killing Krampus, and then realizing that Krampus was just doing the bidding of Santa all along. So one time they just go, fuck it, let's kill Santa next, kind of thing, and that's what the film is. So yeah. So
I like that idea. I like that idea.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that. That sounds so perfect. Did you watch a lot of the because recently there was Violent Night and there have been a few other like Krampus movies. Have you watched a lot of the holiday horror movies? Is that your inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, Hannah loves Christmas horror. One of the segments that she wrote for Mosaic is like Christmas set. It's set in a shopping centre on Christmas, where like a lone security guard has to look after the building and can't be with her family on Christmas, kind of thing. So, but I like them too, and actually, like you sort of said about like the kind of Krampus films, like I think with that title, it's like destined to get changed into just like Krampus the Awakening or something, because that's just what they do with all of them, right? It's just like Krampus something. But yeah, I like those, and there's some genuinely good ones, and there's like the supermarket shelf disposable ones, but they're still like a lot of fun as well. So yeah, I love. I think there's something about like setting. It's quite vague in Ice Cream on the Beach, but we kind of have it set around Halloween. But I always think it does add something when you do sort of attach it to a season. There's something about it. So yeah, Christmas horror is great.
That's great. I noticed when I actually watched Ice Cream on the Beach last night, so I was fresh to it. I know we were interviewing, and I have Tubi, which is like a horror movie lover's dream. Like they have great stuff on there. So I was watching that, and I noticed the Halloween thing, and was curious because I know when my sister moved to England, Halloween is not what it is here. I mean, I know that it's celebrated, but it's more of an adult holiday, right? It's more of an adult, like go out to the bars. Am I wrong in this? Am I?
Yeah, no, you're completely right. It's nothing like it is in America. And I suppose, I mean, we had to do what we did do is done on a budget. I think otherwise it would have been like more explicitly Halloween, but we couldn't afford lots of decorations. But we were, I guess, kind of slightly aping more like the Americanized version of Halloween, and it isn't really the way like British people celebrate it. It's not really a big deal.
Okay.
here. I think it's got a bit bigger. Like certainly, like now you get more displays. But I mean, I've like spent Salem in like I spent Halloween in Salem before, so I've seen how big it can be in America,
Yeah.
like at Halloween. Uh, so so yeah, it's not really like that at all. But we just kind of liked the idea of that kind of being the backdrop to it a bit. And as I say, like if Ice Cream on the Beach had a bigger budget, we would have probably had like everyone's front garden covered in all this Halloween stuff. But we just couldn't do that. So it's like limited, but
No, it was fine. I just was curious of what pulled you to that, because I Halloween is definitely my favorite holiday. So I was curious with that. I do have a question. I mean, going kind of with Ice Cream on the Beach, like I'm a big sucker for locations on films, like cool locations really bring me into a film. And I loved the location for Ice Cream on the Beach. I just like the little town. How did you choose that? Like what made you, was it just the ease of getting there, filming on the weekends and doing that, or was there something more to it, the look of it? How did you guys choose that?
so I think it's a bit of so when like Ice Cream on the Beach started out, you know, it wasn't always going to be this 80s thing set on, you know, in a sort of fishing village-esque thing originally. But we started to think like we'd never really used the backdrop of Southend very well, like we'd never really used the seafront. And we started to think about, you know, could we set it in the 80s? And here without basically like there's Southend, and part of Southend is Leigh-on-Sea, and Leigh-on-Sea has the old town, which is what you see a lot in Ice Cream on the Beach. And you know, there are modern parts to it, but it's basically untouched and it looks old. You know, when you film it, you can't really tell. So we just wrote a lot of it, and we decided that the characters would be like fishermen, because we knew if we filmed in that bit of old Leigh, it would look old. So we kind of wrote around that location, sort of knowing that it would work with that time period. Or you know, you could probably have set it earlier there, because it just hasn't been touched for however many years really. And it is on our doorstep, as I say. Like Leigh-on-Sea is like a 10-minute drive from where I am right now, kind of thing. It's
Okay.
very, very close.
Given any budget, is there somewhere in the world you'd love to shoot a horror movie in?
Ooh. I really like I went and saw My Neighbor Totoro at the Barbican in London.
Oh yeah.
In that building, the Barbican, I don't know if you've been there, but it's really like interesting. Like it's got really interesting architecture. I think they call it brutalist. It's very like concretey. And when we were in there, I really was like saying to Hannah, like, what's being filmed here and stuff. Not that I'd ever be able to get it, but I think like a little while later, we were watching this guy called Joe Cornish. He did Attack the Block, but he did a TV show recently called Lockwood and Co,
Yeah.
which was okay. But they actually used the Barbican as their like headquarters, which is kind of what I was thinking. Like you could make, because it's just really like interesting like architecture. There's a place, it's really local to here, Brentwood. It's called the Bunker, I think, or the Nuclear Bunker, and that's just like an old bunker, but it's, you know, it's almost like a museum, but they do hire it out for filming, but it's not like very attainable. But it, you know, it's kind of got like this military-esque thing, and it's got like old hospital beds in it. So I'd love to film there. That might happen one day. You never know.
That sounds creepy. I'm gonna have to check
Yeah,
that out.
yeah.
That would be cool. That would be cool. You guys also have a lot of those, I guess in the Thames and like going off towards the bay. I'm so not great with England geography, but don't you guys have those towers that are in the water, like the gunner towers or like the
Yeah.
lookouts?
Yes,
So
we do.
I've always found those super creepy too. I'm not saying that you could film on those. That would get you very, but those have always kind of creeped me out as well. So
Yeah, no, that would be cool. I think we have one that's fairly local. I think people walk out to it, but I've never been there. But yes, they would be really cool.
That's quite cool. So I've always kind of wanted to ask this. We do it on every single episode. Usually it's Chris who does, but I really wanted to know what you thought. We always ask our guests if they have a good horror movie to like start someone off with a horror film, because my best friend, for example, won't watch horror movies. Chris has friends who don't. And you know so many like different horror movies from indie to really popular, well-known one. What would be a good starter horror movie for you?
It's tricky because I feel like I mentioned it a lot, but if you were like sort of mainstream, I probably would recommend Scream, just because I do think it's a really good like introduction to particularly slashers, and then you can like you know figure out what the references are and go and find those films. So I think it feels boring because I've mentioned it before, but I think that's a great sort of gateway film. With indie, what would I recommend? It was really one that I think like it kind of like it's sort of like it walks that sort of tightrope of being like quite a low budget indie film, but it looks really good, and it kind of it got onto like Sky Movies and things, was a thing called Book of Monsters, and that was really good. It was really like a really well made film. It did really well. It went to Fright Fest, but I think that's quite good because like maybe if someone's like more hasn't really seen much indie stuff but they're more into mainstream, I'd recommend that, because it's kind of it still has like it's not got Hollywood production values, but it looks really good, and it's got lots of different monsters in it and practical effects, and it's a lot of fun. It's like it's one I really enjoyed. Yeah. So
when you go watch a horror movie, are you looking to be entertained, like just have like a fun ride, or are you past the point of like, man, I'm spooked, or I get that like gut feeling, what are you looking for when you pick a horror movie like you want to go see?
I do like being scared. I like films generally that have a bit of sense of humor, like have a sense of humor about themselves a bit. I don't like things that are too like po-faced and sort of overly serious. But yeah, I think something that has like a bit of comedy. I like films that, I feel like film should like entertain. So I like films that have like, those moments that sort of like excite you and make you laugh, or scare you. But yeah, I guess I like kind of like a mixture really of
Right.
yeah.
Did you have a very first comedy horror movie you fell in love with? Because Scream is, like you said, pastiche, but you have one that's like a proper comedy horror.
Yeah, again, I've said it, but Evil Dead 2, I would say, like,
Yeah.
that's like that's just like a film that like I watched, and I was like, I can't believe what I'm watching, and this is just amazing, and just like off the wall, and I don't know if I can quite articulate how much I love that film, just how stupid it is. So yeah, definitely Evil Dead 2, and just I think like if I could have made one film, it would be that film. I don't have the talent to have been able to do that, but I love that film so much.
Now, I'm horrible with names. Bruce Campbell is an Evil Dead, right? That's Bruce Campbell.
Yeah. Bruce Campbell.
So, any thoughts of getting reaching out to Bruce Campbell and asking him to be in one of your next feature?
I'd absolutely love that. I think he literally just retired. He announced it about 2 weeks ago. I think that he's like, I'm whatever age he is, and he's like, I guess I'm done now. But yeah, I'd love to have Bruce Campbell. I like that like Sam Raimi has like consistently put him in his films in like silly, like all the Spider-Man films he did, is just gets him in there for like a stupid cameo, and he was in like the latest Doctor Strange film, and he just had him like punching himself. It's just like I
love that.
Good stuff.
Now, is there any horror film or TV program that's horror that you're looking forward to seeing that you haven't yet?
Sorry.
Videoshop Tales of Terror. Whoa!
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I suppose like we can talk about like the more indie stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Sure, yeah, please.
Oh yeah, so yeah, quite a few. Tom Lee Rutter's Pocket film of Superstitions, I think, is really exciting. So Tom Lee Rutter He did a film called Day of the Stranger. He also did a Bella in the Witch Elm. He's
Oh
like
yeah.
he's a really interesting director, and he's made this film, Pocket Film of Superstitions, and I think it's all like segmented, and there's just different superstitions, and he's been shooting it for a long time, and it's premiering this month at, oh no, I can't think of it. I can't think of the festival, but it's premiering really soon, and
So
I imagine it's bound to be at Horror on Sea next year as well. But that film I think is really exciting. I mean, I'll mention Witches of the Sands because that will be coming out at some point, hopefully. And I'm really excited about that. I am vaguely in it a couple of times, I think, but I'm just so intrigued by that because I've spent days on the set and I still don't really feel like I know what that film is. Also, listened to countless interviews with Tony and heard him talk about the film, and I still don't know what that film is.
I was gonna say he was on with us for an hour and 15 minutes, and we don't know. He doesn't know, so it's all good.
I think it'll be. I mean, the trailer that Tony and Andy put together that they showed at Darkfest was like fantastic, and I think if that's any indication of what they've got, then they've got something really special. So I'm really looking forward to that. I feel like I should mention more because there's so many things coming up. But yeah, I definitely like Pocket Film of Superstitions really got me intrigued. And Witches of the Sands.
I'll make sure we have up links to both of those as well, so people can check them out. Hopefully it'll be happening over my voiceover if I've edited this correctly. Really good.
No, that's good. We definitely want to hear about the indie stuff that's coming out because we were talking recently about like, what are you looking forward to? And I'm like, I mean, I'll see whatever's coming out, but like now I'm going back. Like we're trying to pick each other's brains of like, have you ever seen this movie? Have you ever seen this movie? You know, like because we've watched so many. So the indie stuff is great. And like I said earlier, it's like Tubi in the States. I'm assuming maybe it's different in the UK, but Tubi in the States is like a horror movie fan's dream because it does have a lot of the independent horrors as well as mainstream stuff. So you can see Scream on there, but you can also see Ice Cream on the Beach. You can see, Slacks. You can see, the Cyst. Like all sorts of stuff. But
actually, I'd like to ask you that because we don't get Tubi in the UK, and Chris is always telling me how great it is. What do you have a decent streaming service for horror films? I feel like I have to spread myself amongst everything, and then also end up buying Blu-rays anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like obviously I've heard that before about Tubi, and I don't really think we have we have Shudder here, which you don't get anything too low budget. There's been a few things that have kind of got on there, which is interesting to see. But I think even with Shudder, like we don't get the full amount of films that you get abroad either. So it's like so we have a few different things, and pay for stuff on Prime and things really, but there's no not that I know of, there's no dedicated service.
Well, Tubi is listening, come to the UK.
Or it sounds like there's a business opportunity for somebody out there.
Yeah.
So we're getting towards the end now. Obviously we want to let you go, but we do a normal film every month, and this month it's because of 4th of July. It's usually a London horror film, but we're doing an American one. Have you seen Secret Window with Johnny Depp? And if you have, what did you think?
I have seen it. I don't remember it very well.
No, that's fine. We sprung this on you. It's totally okay.
Sprung it on you, and it was also almost 20 years old at this point. I think it was like 2004. So
so he's like he's a writer in it, is he? And he's like, is he in like
he's in like a cabin upstate?
Yeah, I have seen it, but it's just like I can't think of.
No worries. The one that we had last month was Extra. Do you remember that one at all, or have you seen it? No. Extra is worth watching. It's mad. It's definitely very 80s, but I think you'd really like that because you seem to like the 80s look and the 80s mood.
Sci-fi horror 1980s.
You can see it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Must be good.
No, thank you. You've been really sweet answering our weird questions. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? Any other projects or things that are coming up? We want to make sure you have time and space to tell people about them.
I think we sort of covered it all, but like we've got Videoshop Tales of Terror that's out for pre-order now. You can pre-order that film. We're working on Mosaic. Hopefully that will be coming out at the beginning of next year. And we just did a segment for the last horoscopes, and we're now doing Python for the second horoscopes, which is Maiko's horoscopes, different directors. Tony's one of the directors. Tony Martin's one of the directors we spoke to previously. Yes, we're doing that, and that's going to be like mad and really like colorful and saturated, but it is horror because I like this idea of doing like a really like oversaturated kind of nightmare-y thing that's just too colorful for a horror film, sort of like Wes Anderson-esque, but a horror film.
Okay.
And it's very cheeky. It's like a proper broad comedy, but like with a sort of horror twist. So yeah, they're kind of the next things, and the documentary really. But yeah.
I'm looking forward to all of it. I want to see them all. So sounds great.
The Pocket Film of Superstitions is at the 50 Years of Classic British Horror in Great Yarmouth.
Yeah, that's happening in a couple weeks' time, actually. If anybody is in Yarmouth, I'll be up there selling death lines. Thank you, Alex, for that impromptu plug.
So that's where you can also check out Pocket Film of Superstitions.
There you go.
Perfect. Yeah, come to Great Yarmouth. It's very pretty. There's a beach, so you can get a little ice cream on the beach vibes and see the movie. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Alex. We've really appreciated having you on, and we are very excited about all of the films coming up. We'll put up links to everything, and we just wish you best of luck. You've got so much going on. It's wonderful.
I really appreciate you asking me to come on. It's been great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And we will see you next time, listeners. Thank you for joining us.
All right.
If you want to share your thoughts about this episode, please head to our Facebook or YouTube pages. We're grateful to Kukurbit, who made our music. Thank you for listening, and please join us next time for the London Horror Movie Club.